Welcome to the LinguaFolio Café for May 11th. This is our fourth and final cafe for this school year. The cafes this year have been on the second Tuesdays quarterly from 3:30 to 4:30, and that's the plan for today. Our topic for today is using the Passport in LinguaFolio to move on to next school year. Certainly a timely topic as we're all preparing for the end of this school year and beginning to plan for next year. My name is Anne-Marie Gunter. I'm the World Languages Consultant at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. I am represented by the Bitmoji on the right side of the screen. And I have with me my colleague, Sally Stocks, one of our ESL Title III consultants, who's represented on the left side of the screen with her coffee cup with a heart on it. Today's agenda is pretty simple and straightforward. We're going to do a few more things with welcome and talk about logistics like your control panel. And then we're going to introduce our guest speakers from around North Carolina. We have 2 or 3 people here today who are specifically here to talk about using LinguaFolio and using the Passport in LinguaFolio. And we'll also have opportunities to hear from you and your questions. So be ready to share those whenever they occur to you. We will do our chat, and then at the end of the broadcast, we have some reminders about things happening with LinguaFolio, particularly with training and so forth, that's available. All right, Sally's going to talk to us a little bit about the Webex Controls and our Mentimeter.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. So we have our chat available, and since you were checking the audio, it looks like you found that section. And also you can raise your hand. And if you want to be unmuted, you will need to tell us in the chat. When we have that Q&A session and sharing, then just let us know and we'll find you and unmute you, because I think you don't have that option in Webex, but we can do it. So please feel free when we are sharing to request that in the chat. And we're going to use Mentimeter. This is a free tool that we love using because it shows some graphics and it's a little bit interactive and it's very simple to use. You type on your device menti.com and then we provide a code. You enter that code and then you will be able to select the option that answers the question that we have on the screen. And that is something that we're going to do in the next slides. Okay, and this slide is just, we're going to have only one poll today because we want most of the time of our session today to be with our panelists, sharing and asking all the questions that you may have about everything that we have to share today. So if you go to menti.com, and we have shared in the chat, and select one of these options. The code is A2, and I think Anne-Marie is adding the code in the chat. Thank you. A2422146, and select why you have joined us today. And maybe if you are one of our returning participants, you have completed this before, so you're very familiar with this. If you don't have access for whatever reason, just feel free to add in the chat why you are joining us today. So if you can click on the code, and Maria will see if we have some of our attendees entering their answers. See if they have joined because they want to access PD for ESL, world languages. They want to ask a question about LinguaFolio, connect with other educators, earn 1 contact hour for license renewal, gather some information to share with others, and or learn about new resources.
We do have some results coming up. I am showing the Mentimeter screen on our screen. So if you want to get your answers in, there's still a few of you who could type in your answers. You can select all that apply to you. And because this is an online tool, I'll just refresh our screen, so any new results will show up automatically.
And we see our leading response, Access PD for language educators. So we are going to share some information about one of the components, and also at the end you will listen about our Canvas and all the other opportunities. So you are in the right place today. Then we also see gathering information to share with others and learn about resources and earn one contact hour. And we also have 17, we have 3 with 17% connect with other educators. And this is great. So please, as we said at the beginning, just type in the chat or say if you want to be unmuted, and then we would love to hear from you and have you participating, asking questions to our amazing panelists. And I see some friends, some common names, familiar names in the attendees list, so we are excited. Please feel free to participate at any time and share how you have used LinguaFolio.
All right. Well, again, thank you for joining us today. We'll go ahead now and get started with our information. We have 3 guest speakers for you today. Their names and pictures are all up on the screen. I'll start by introducing all of them just briefly, but I do want them to share a little bit more about themselves and how they use LinguaFolio, either currently or in the past, because they're going to talk to you about their lessons learned. So we have Reve Bostwick with us. She is both an ESL teacher and a world language teacher. She teaches Japanese as well. We also have Anthony Nesbitt. He is an ESL teacher as well as an EL teacher network leader. And then we have Sarah Booten, a Japanese teacher. So they're all with us here today. So I'm going to go ahead and let them each introduce themselves a little bit more clearly about how long they've been using LinguaFolio and why they think it's a benefit.
Hi, this is Reve Bostwick, and I've used LinguaFolio a little bit with my ESL students as a teacher in an elementary school, and I have not used it honestly this year with our virtual in-person / hybrid model going on. But I have also used it in the past with the students who are NC virtual students. So that would be mostly high school students in a virtual setting. We assist students from all over the state of North Carolina to learn Japanese through Canvas.
Anthony, you can go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself with some details.
Hi, my name is Anthony Nesbitt. I've been using LinguaFolio for probably about 5 years now with students that I teach. I work with English learners basically from kindergarten through high school. Like Reve, I haven't been as successful this year implementing it as I'd wanted to. It's really a tool I use to help the students to reflect. We use it for goal setting, and also it's just a very nice tool to help students to keep and monitor their growth and their own progress.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Booten, and I am a Japanese teacher, conversation coach, as well as instructional leader with North Carolina Virtual. And with Reve, we've been using the LinguaFolio for quite some time now. When I first started with NC Virtual, we were using it very consistently, and then we took a little bit of a hiatus for a while as we ended up switching over to a new learning management system. And we've brought back our LinguaFolio in kind of a new format this semester, and it's going very well. The students are engaging with it, and I think this format that we're using is great. So looking forward to continue working with that.
Well, great. Sounds like this school year has been a challenge for everyone, of course, but we are here today to talk about specifically the passport in LinguaFolio and moving on to the next school year or the next course that a student might be encountering. So the first question we're going to talk about is, how do you describe using the Passport and LinguaFolio with your students? So for example, do you talk about its purpose, about listing the language learning experiences and accomplishments, about updating the proficiency charts? How do you describe using the Passport with your students? And anyone can jump in amongst our speakers.
Okay, sorry, my computer must be very touchy. So for me, what I do with the Passport when explaining it to students is I tell them that it is a nice condensed way. Now, I do have to simplify this when I talk to English learners, but a condensed way to summarize their English. If it's English with ESL, their English experiences. If it's with foreign language, then with the Japanese students, it would be their experience with other languages. It could be Spanish, French, Japanese, whatever language it might be. And it's just a nice way to put all of that information together in one place so that they can keep reflecting on that and help them understand their journey through acquisition of language. Just like it is called the Passport. So they're able to take that with them on their journey to mastering the language. And it's good for them to make checkpoints along the way to go back and see, where are they now? So if they don't ever reflect back to see where they are now, then I think that you don't really remember where you've come from and how long and how far you have progressed on your journey. So I like to explain it that way to students when I do have the opportunity to talk to them face to face about it.
This is Anthony. In the past, I've paired it with their access scores for English learners. It's a document we take out and we kind of reflect on some of the activities we've done, and we sort of almost use it almost like a checklist to see where we are and then how that lines up to their access scores and the growth they've made in each domain. And also, it's a great starting point to kind of use that as a piece to set goals for the upcoming school year.
I think Anthony and Reve did a great job of summing up the purpose of LinguaFolio. Another purpose that we might want to think about, maybe not necessarily present to students, but for teachers of languages. One of the things that we sometimes struggle with is atrophy of students moving on from one level of a language to another. And particularly, I find with Japanese being a category 4 language where it takes the students a lot longer in some cases to progress and find that ladder of proficiency. They have to spend a lot more time studying and more hours invested into their language. So it can sometimes make students feel like, well, I'm spending all this time in the language and maybe I can't accomplish too much just yet. But I think having that visual representation of seeing just how much they've progressed is a good way to keep them motivated and also potentially to help them to stay in the language. So it's a way for us to retain students and have them continue their journey rather than stopping or going on to take a different language.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, especially the practical applications of the Passport. We're going to move on to the next question, which is, what do you tell your students about using LinguaFolio in the next year's course or program, or with their next language teacher or learning environment, wherever they're headed?
So I've used it to just help the students to, I know this has been mentioned, but just to continue on that journey where they are. It's once they're invested then it's a way for them to take ownership of their own learning and to continue that progress. So it's something they can take with them, and through the transition of middle school, high school, or different teachers, it's something that they kind of own and can continue monitoring their own progress.
So I think that when using that LinguaFolio passport, we can advise our students that they can reflect on where they currently are with the language and then look ahead to see, do they have any ideas for how they would like to continue using the language? And if so, then how could they help themselves grow in that language? One example might be that on part of the passport, there's a place where you can list your experiences, your certificates, and things like that. So if you see a student that maybe doesn't have anything listed under language experiences, maybe that is something that they could set as a goal for themselves as to finding an opportunity to have a language experience. And it could be with that target language they've already been learning, or it might be with a new language. Maybe they don't have anything other than the course that they have taken thus far, but maybe they should seek out opportunities that might assist them in learning more language. Also, too, it can help if they are bringing it to maybe a job site with them, and maybe they were using it after graduation. It might be able to be an informal piece of evidence for their prospective employer to show that they have made growth in the language and they are, based on their own self-assessment at a current level based on what they can show that job employer, or next could be maybe even for college, to help provide evidence for them to say, hey, this is what I can do now at this language level.
I actually love how this question is worded, where there is that extra emphasis on moving on to either their next language teacher or truly their next learning environment. And keeping in mind that in my case, at least, I do teach a lot of high school students, and many of them do move on to the university environments, and many of them might just move into either a career environment, or they might be going more of a trade school route. But what I love about the LinguaFolio is that there's so much value add, and that it's a way to not only have them assess, but also be a snapshot that they can show to others to say, this is where I am, and these are my goals going forward. And even in cases where students maybe are graduating and they are moving on to a different learning environment where maybe language isn't part of their plan right now, that's not to say that it won't be in their future. So if they can hang on to their LinguaFolio and potentially pick up their language studies in the future, or maybe later on if a job opportunity might require it, at least they have that to show this is where they are, and they might be able to look at the goals that they had set for themselves and say, okay, this is something I can start working on, rather than potentially having to start from scratch and pick something up all over again.
This is Atli, and some of our educators have shared in the past how they use the passport to help English learners work with their new teachers, because sometimes they don't see them if they are in the same school and they're going to continue receiving ESL services with the same teacher. Still, they won't see them the first month, maybe when the school year starts, because the teacher might be screening or working on some other things related to the L program. So the student has the passport and they can talk about their own learning and say, hey, this is my new teacher, this is what I was working on last year, this is what I have accomplished. And if they understand what their language proficiency is and what their scale scores are in terms of the access assessment, then they can have that ownership of their learning and tell their new teachers, this is where I am, this is what I want to do. Now you can help me set some goals. And then that will also help that process with the ESL teacher when they come on board and say, well, now we're going to start working, and maybe a month after the school has started, but the student has had that ownership and they have received that additional support in their other classes. Or if they're moving to another school, they have been transferred, then they have that shows the other teachers this is what the student is able to do, so they don't have to wait for the report in the AL record. They know, and the student is the one telling them, this is what I can do, and this is what I want to be able to do. So that's a really powerful tool that the students can use as part of their learning process.
Sadly, I'm so glad. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. This is Reve. I'm sorry. I was just going to say I was so glad that you brought that up because I had been thinking about that and I forgot to mention it. But that is so true. And then that way we can give students more ownership over their, more control over how they want to focus their learning in the future. So if they know that they have really strong listening skills, then we can help guide our students on how they can leverage those listening skills to help support some of their areas in language where maybe they're not quite as strong. So I'm so glad you mentioned that because I had written that down somewhere to say and I forgot to say it. So thank you, Zetley.
Sure.
Well, and we all know, LinguaFolio is designed to empower students and to help them become autonomous learners and really take ownership of their learning, just like you've all said. I wonder if any of you have any individual student stories you could share about a student who did just that and then came back and told you about it, or you heard about it later, maybe, on how they use their LinguaFolio to educate others or to share with an employer or maybe another campus to know where they needed to go for language. Do we have some student stories to share?
I wish that I did, but to be honest, there are only a very few students who have kept in touch with me, and none of them has specifically mentioned LinguaFolio, but some of them did decide to go on to university and study Japanese at the higher level, which is great, but typically I don't keep in touch, unfortunately.
For me in the elementary school, these students that I have this year, they were all able, now I didn't use the full LinguaFolio, but what we did is we did base our ideas on where they are currently. We had them do a self-assessment, and then we did ask students to set their own language goals this year. And so based on that, especially my fifth graders, they have focused a lot on the type of language skill that they need to acquire because it wasn't quite as strong as the others. And they set goals for themselves. And then as we were doing assignments throughout the year, they would say, oh yeah, I need to work on speaking. I need to work on this type of speaking. And so they would try to help themselves and remember that they need to speak more in class time in order to achieve their goals. So I know that that's not really concrete evidence, but I could see that they were taking more ownership over their language acquisition activities this year.
I don't quite have a story where a student used LinguaFolio per se, but something similar. I had a student come in a few months ago from Texas, and the student came in with a different test, and I wasn't sure what that meant, where the student was and what the student could do. So we were able to take some time and just sit down with the passport and kind of just check off some things and just talk to the student about what he was able to do and some things that he might need to work on. So we were able to kind of go through that goal setting process, but I hope to work with all of the students so they have that and they have the ability, if they ever leave the state or move to a state that's not necessarily a WIDA state, that they do come with what they know and being able to, as we mentioned, to tell the teachers and their peers what they're able to do and what they need to work on.
Another part of this question that I've heard several of you mention is thinking about what happens with that LinguaFolio and the student for the next language teacher or the next learning environment that a student is in. Maybe they go from elementary to middle school or something like that. Can you talk a little bit about how you educate your colleagues about using LinguaFolio, whether you're sort of training them to use it in their own classrooms or helping them understand how students are using it to become more empowered with their language learning?
Here at the elementary school where I teach, we have given the classroom teachers the biography where they do the self-assessment. We have given them the self-assessment to assess their own language skills, to give them an idea of the different types of language skills that we are trying to have our students acquire while they are either trying to learn a foreign language or English as a second language with us. Another thing that I like to do is we're trying something where students use the same self-assessment over multiple years and try to color code it differently so that they can see their growth in a way that's not numeric and it's not check marks, but it's actually highlighting the box on the self-assessment to help them see where they've grown. We just have to use a different type of coding system each year or each semester.
I generally try to put a copy of some information from the Passport to all the content teachers so that they can see, they approach the students from an asset perspective, not necessarily like a deficit perspective. So how much they know and they're already able to do. And even though they may not meet the content goals, that, you know, again, meeting with the teacher at the end or giving them information from the Passport at the end of the year, they're able to see how much they've grown.
Well, I have to take a moment to brag on Reveille actually, because whenever we re-implemented our LinguaFolio at NC Virtual with our Japanese program, Reveille actually went through and spearheaded a project where she made the LinguaFolio form into a Google form that's really user friendly. The students can click through it. They can choose what they feel applies to them and complete their self-assessments that way. So we do have access to all of that, which is great to have it housed in one place. And then as far as our teachers and how we roll that out as part of our professional development at NC Virtual, we do have our e-learning community meetings where we can go through and as a department discuss different topics. And so whenever we rolled out this new program, we were able to take a look. In fact, Reveille actually had some options for us to look at, and we talked it out as a community and we decided to go with the Google Docs and the Google Forms rather, as we thought that would be best for the students. So we were able to actually get some input to Reveille to make that happen. And the teachers in our department always know that they can come into us with questions. We can bounce ideas off of each other, but it's been a great rollout and I'm excited to continue using it.
And it's great that you mentioned that incorporating another digital tool, in this case, Google Forms, because sometimes we think like we have the materials and we have to work with this, and now that we are not seeing the students or we don't have them all the time, how can we use them? But then when you use a digital tool and you incorporate it, you kind of adapt it to what your students need, that still helps them be aware of what they're learning, how they're learning the language, and use LinguaFolio as that tool that they need to help them in that process. So that's really good. I don't know if you have used any other tools, any other digital tools as you collect the evidence and start working on the passport.
That's a really good point because it is important to have a medium that's going to work with us. And since we are an entirely online environment, We need to have a medium that's friendly for that type of student. And in the past, whenever we had LinguaFolio, we had them make their own Word documents and they would need to save them locally on their computer. And sometimes they would get lost. And it was really cumbersome. And also to check it on our end, we'd have to go through and open up all these individual documents and see what students are putting down. But this new Google form is a great medium for the online students because they're able to get in and use it. They generally don't have any problems with it. And I think it makes them more likely to do the self-assessment rather than just saying, oh, this is too much of a hassle. I'll just do this some other time and then just not do it. So it's been a great tool for us.
When you're in the face-to-face environment, it is easier to have a physical folder for students to just always go in and drop things into that physical folder. And when they're in the online virtual environment, sometimes it could be a little bit more chaotic if they don't always save items to their Google Drive folder where it belongs. So I think that requires a lot of upfront guidance from the instructor to explain exactly if you're collecting evidence virtually, where exactly should that be stored, and just to make sure it's always getting to that correct location. For us, with the Google form type, they can always link their document within the Google form when they submit their evidence. Of course, we do need to make sure sharing settings are okay with that, but other than that, as long as they always make sure to put it in the same virtual digital location, then I think that you would be okay.
Before we go on to our last question, I want to pause just a minute because we've been talking about a lot with LinguaFolio and how we help our students use the Passport to move on to the next year or the next teacher. But what about us as teachers? What are we doing at this moment to think about transitioning with LinguaFolio to the next school year or the next environment we're going to be teaching in? Remember, you can answer this as thinking about how you're applying LinguaFolio in your classroom, as well as thinking about even using LinguaFolio yourself. We're all lifelong language learners, and so sometimes teachers, in fact, have their own LinguaFolio as a way to connect with students. So what are you all doing to prepare for the next year or the next course with LinguaFolio?
And Marie, that's very good. You just gave me some more work to do for the end of the year. But I think that's really good that we should actually go back and look at the results for our students and see where do they feel that they fall on that self-assessment? How do they feel they have progressed? And then we can maybe correlate that with our standards for that course and see if the students feel like they have met all of the standards for that course. Now that would be for if you're teaching a foreign language. When teaching English as a second language, you could look to see whether or not students feel like they are making the progress that they need in order to achieve their goal of exiting within 5 years, and see if they've made that year's worth of growth. But I think that's good for me as a teacher to reflect on to make sure I'm helping students feel like they're meeting their goals in addition to me, feeling like they've met their goals as well.
I think for me, the Passport and LinguaFolio in general just fits into that natural reflection, goal setting process. As I'm approaching the end of this year, I'll be using that to have students reflect on how they did, the evidence they have to show that. And as we go into the next school year, just using that same information to set goals for the upcoming school year.
These are all really good points. And another good idea, at least for me, something that I want to look into is checking out areas where students feel that they might have some weaknesses and see what I might be able to do to provide some remediation tools they can use over the summer to get them feeling like they're ready to go on to the next level. And I wish we would have had this last year. especially because there's sort of that gap that we're trying to bridge with the pandemic when students weren't as engaged with their studies as before. And then coming into the fall 2020 school year, that was a little bit chaotic because of that. But now that we do have the tool at NC Virtual where students are doing these self-assessments, we can dig down and see, okay, this student maybe needs to work on this particular area, or maybe some remediation is needed in this area. And as a teacher, I can reach out to the students and provide some tools that they can look over in the summer and hopefully get up to speed so that way they're definitely ready to jump into the next level of language learning.
And we have a question in the chat, Anne-Marie, before we continue to the next question. And it says, what about one website to store their evidence from year to year? And I wanted to share in the chat LinguaFolio. Oh, if I can spell it, I think I spell it wrong. LinguaFolio online for North Carolina. And this is a resource that is available for our educators, and teacher accounts are free and they can set all the can-do statements and follow all the information that we have. Is the same, is the online version of the tool, but having the student accounts has a cost. So if you want to explore that option, then you can go to that link and you will see all the information that we have. North Carolina participated in the pilot with the University of Oregon, and that's a great resource. And many of our, thank you, awesome. I see that Anne-Marie has opened our Google site with that specific page. And we also say, like, this was created with them. This was created in collaboration with the University of Oregon. So if this is something you can explore, and maybe your district has additional funding that they can utilize for this, for purchasing those student accounts, this would be that year to year, because it will store all the evidence that your students will have. And we have on our Google site the description of what LinguaFolio Online for North Carolina is, the pilot that we had in 2018 and 2019, and how we finished in 2020. And we also have the different tutorials, the tutorials for teachers, how to set up their accounts, which I said are free, and those student tutorials, how educators can create the student accounts. And it has like all the different information, if you are using certain device, if it's an Android or iOS. So all that information is there. It's something that you think you can bring to your district and they can explore and see if they have funding. I know for ESL, some school districts receive Title III funding, and they could purchase some of these student accounts with this additional funding that they receive, but it's very specific to ESL. So not all school districts have this additional funding. So this is something that you will explore with administrators, with your school administrators, and see how you can implement this option if this is what you want. But as I know, Rebay and Sarah, they were talking, they had been using Canvas. So maybe they can share how they have stored those evidences and how they had been using all the materials without having LFO, or maybe they already have it.
I wish we had it, but no, we don't. I did participate in the pilot for this LinguaFolio Online, and it's really good. It's really user-friendly. It's convenient. But yes, we do not have the funding for it. So what we have done is we've just created the Google Forms. And so we do have a Google form, and students submit their results, and then we can always download the results from those Google Form submissions. And then also too, there is another Google Slide format that we've created, and students can just update their progress on that Google Slide as well. And so we can just keep that from year to year as well. So we've got two different ways that we can always, access those results from year to year.
Now's a good time to point out too, just like Revee's been talking about, we do have LinguaFolio Online. It is set up for us in particular, but also all the materials for using LinguaFolio, either for world languages or for ESL, are posted on the website, and usually as Word and PDF documents. So you can use them like that. You can arrange them in folders and things, or you can do what they've done at NC Virtual, which is turn some of those into Google Forms within your own system so that students can access them that way. So there's a lot of flexibility there with the LinguaFolio materials. All right, I'm checking for additional questions. We are getting ready to move to our last official question. So if you've got another question you want to ask our panelists, be sure and put it in the chat box. But our last question for today is a simple and straightforward one about giving advice. So what advice do you give students or other teachers about using the LinguaFolio Passport for opportunities like are listed here? Maybe exiting English learner status, or transitioning to native speaker or heritage language courses, or being placed in advanced language courses, or even getting credit through the Credit by Demonstrated Master CDM process in high school, or another placement process maybe at college. What advice do you give students and other teachers about it?
I can speak to the opportunities for exiting students. I think in terms of English language learners, one thing that I've been able to use this sort of as a tool to motivate students, or to at least to help them see their growth as they're exiting, especially with middle and high school students. If if all their content teachers are on board and they're really in tune to what they need to do to exit the program, and they're able to correlate what they're doing in a content class to how it specifically relates to a domain or an activity that could help them to achieve that exit status. I think that that's one way that LinguaFolio can be used with students and teachers to get sort of everyone on the same page, and really helping them to hone in on that goal of exiting the program.
I alluded to this just a little while ago, but I would just encourage students to be able to reflect back on their progress, as what Anthony was saying, and then see how they might be able to leverage current skills that they have to help them increase skills in some of the other domains. So it's being mindful, and it's also teaching them some metacognition skills, because they really have to reflect on their current progress, and then also think about, okay, how could I apply my current status, my current levels of language ability, and then move forward to advance further. So we do have to give them those opportunities to develop that skill. And then also too, if they have goals for the future of becoming more proficient, or I had a student who had a goal this year with the online Japanese program, who wanted to place out of the entry-level Japanese courses at college. So she was using her current skill level to determine how she needed to improve. And she was eventually able to place out of the level 100 level course in Japanese and placed into the 200 level. And I think that was mostly due to her reflecting on her current skills, where she's at, and then trying to figure out how could she help herself advance to that next level based on where she currently is.
Rebe, that's a great story, and I was going to touch upon that, but kind of piggybacking off of that, I tell students to make sure that they are advocating for themselves, make sure that if they really want to do a particular program, for example, but it might require a higher level of proficiency, to try to use tools like the Passport to show that they've gone through education, that they are able to do certain tasks. and see what they can do. The worst they're going to be told is no, but in a lot of cases, I find that when students do advocate for themselves, that they have better opportunities. So I would definitely recommend to students to use this as a tool so they can advocate for the education that they want. And then as far as either teachers or students, I would again encourage them, and I've said this on a lot of our previous gatherings here, but I would encourage them to have fun with this. It's a lot of fun to study a new language, and while it is a lot of work, it's very rewarding to see what you're able to accomplish. So think about things that you have done and don't be afraid to shine and show off what you've done and use the passport to help you do that. And remember to have fun with it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing today. I'm taking a look to see if we have any other questions for our panelists at the moment. We do thank you for joining us today and sharing all of your lessons learned and your expertise about LinguaFolio, especially during this very challenging year as we move into the next phase of how things will be for our students. Appreciate you joining us today. And we're going to kind of shift now, but please everyone stay on the line in case there are other questions and things like that that our panelists may answer. We're going to shift over to the next part of our broadcast about reminders.
Okay, so we're going to talk about our LinguaFolio classroom materials. And then Marie was exploring the Google side as we were talking about the online option. And I want to know who has explored our website. Just say yes or no in the chat. See if you are still with us today. Yes or no if you have explored our materials in the Google site. No, it's okay. It's okay if you haven't, because this is a good opportunity for you to be aware of these materials. As Marie was mentioning this earlier, we have all the documents available for you to use, and you can download the PDF, you can download the Word documents, and you can use them as you need. Based on your needs, your setting, your students, you can download those materials and use them. If your school district can pay for the online version, then you can use them through that. But if you are using a content management system, Canvas, Google Classroom, or others, then you are also able to download those and use them. And you will see we have separated the materials. We have World Languages and ESL, and we also have another section for the online version of LinguaFolio. And all of these are aligned to the standards. So you will see, for example, I'm going to talk about ESL, and I will invite Anne-Marie to talk about this. And I found only one no. So I take that the other attendees said yes, and they have explored, or maybe they're exploring right now because Anne-Marie shared the links in the chat. But you will see, for example, for ESL that they're aligned to the different levels of language proficiency. So if you are working with your students and you download your biography components and you're working with them, then you can show them, help them understand what does it mean to be at the emerging level. What is it to be in developing? Where is it that I want to be? I want to be in reaching. So they learn about this and they understand what that means. So when they receive those access scores, they understand this and they say, oh, I know what this means, and this is where I am, and this is where I want to be, and this is the kind of help and support that I need from my other teachers. So they, again, don't rely only on their ESL teacher. They are empowered, and they know that they can help themselves and ask for help. So I see Anne-Marie is going to our site, and she has clicked on one of our resources, and this is in a Word document, and also you can open it as a Google Doc. So if you want to add something, make it more personal to your students or your name, you can make those adaptations so you can use it as you need. So we really invite you to go click and explore and make sure that you have used them. And for next year, because if you start now, Then next year, when you start planning, then you will remember, oh, this is what I have seen for LinguaFolio that I can align to my planning. And then you start using it since the beginning with your students, because as our panelists were saying, if you start that process with them by the end of the school year, when you have collected all your evidence in the dossier and you start working on your passport, they already know this. The first year might take a little bit of time, but then as you start progressing, they will learn and they will start doing this. And I think Sarah sharing one of our previous cafes that her students were asking for it. And as well, I see one of our attendees was a panelist, Betsy Burton. I don't know if she wants to be unmuted, but she also shared that her students knew and they felt empowered and they wanted to use their LinguaFolio the following year. So again, we invite you to explore. Everything is available. You can download and adapt as you need. And because of time, we're going to go back to our slides unless we have a question. I think I heard Betsy. You want to say something?
Yes, Betsy's unmuted if she'd like to share.
Okay, I'm sorry, I had a parent call and I had to take that and I did not hear this last part. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. No worries. We're just talking about sharing the materials that are all posted on the website and available for you to download and add to, an LMS
yes.
if you're using it, or use it in your classroom in the way that works for you. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yes, I have gone on there and then downloaded some of the materials. I've had a lot of kids that have been out lately, but they like the materials. They're just kind of getting their minds around really how the things we've done in LinguaFolio fit into the overall plan of where they were and where they're going with their language. Some of the ones are really beginning to see that. Some of the kids are still just basically interacting with the materials on a very present moment basis. So there's a whole spectrum of growth in the way the kids are interacting. But the ones that are at the higher proficiency level, they're really seeing how the materials have sort of built over a period of time and they can see their growth. They like the passport, trying to do that reflection using, I think the important thing about using something like the passport is they're not only just doing, we all do reflective type things, but they are doing a reflection in an organized, strategic way that allows them to get really, see the evidence of what they are accomplishing. And I think that's really important. I just now am going to send, I hope this is all right, but I want to send the website to some friends of mine that are teaching world languages in other states. I don't know if that's okay to do. I think it would be. I would like them to see what we're doing, what we've done, and use the materials for ideas. Is that, can they access the materials and use them from the website?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We always post everything to be used on the website. So please feel free to share it with your colleagues, no matter where they are.
Yes, even though I'm retiring, I have, I still am networking and in communication with people who are doing world languages, actually more than ESL teachers, but I would really like for them to see this, because if a teacher can have the students every day, this is ideal. I mean, this could be the backbone of a curriculum. And I mean, for me, going to 3 and 4 schools and having students out on quarantine and coming back, it's been such a fractured year that I just don't, it's hard for me. I need a passport. I mean, to see where I am as far as teaching them. But I think that these materials help to ground the students. And that's why I think they are really valuable. I would like to feel that I had more closure about how the students had done this year, but I think that this is a sort of like gives us a timeline and some can't say the word right now, specificity about how they are learning and applying their language growth. Even though we've had a crazy year, at the end of the year, I do see real growth and excitement. And students are beginning to understand the written word more than they ever did before, for a variety of reasons, I'm sure, but they are able to now look at some of these types of checklists and directions and apply it to things they've created and things they've read and understood. And I wish I could just stay with them for about another year. I would love to see how it would all turn out in the end, as they progress. I hope they will use these tools, but even if they don't continue with their LinguaFolios, I believe that the training and the teaching of the way to organize language learning has become more a part of the way they think about language. And I think that will affect them as they go. I mean, no matter whether they are doing this particular program or not. So I've been a bit too wordy, but I guess those are my feelings.
Well, thanks, Betsy. And you're right. This is something for all of us to think about. What comes next for our students? How can we use this to empower them? I see several people commenting in the chat that they haven't yet had the opportunity to see another teacher use LinguaFolio, but maybe they're the teacher who needs to use LinguaFolio. And we're going to talk here on this next slide a little bit about how you get training with using LinguaFolio to implement it in your classroom. So, Sally?
Yes, and thank you, Betsy. We always love to hear your experience with LinguaFolio and how your students were using it. And for those of you who are exploring the resources on the site, if you go to the videos, you will see Betsy in action talking about it. So this slide has the series archives. We hosted several webinars this year, and you can access all the materials. We share some handouts, and we have everything on this link. If you explore that as well, you will be able to access the webinars we offer at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the school year with the Google slides and the PDF. And you can also download the PowerPoints in case you want to use it in your school districts, talking about LinguaFolio. And we were talking about how you can learn about LinguaFolio. We also offer a couple of webinars this year, and those were targeted, one for world languages and the other one for ESL. And this summer, the K-12 Standards Curriculum and Instruction Division, we are hosting the Great Hits Collection. We're going to share that very soon with all teachers in the field, and you will be able to find these webinars in that Great Hits. So these are kind of like the highlights of the year, and we have that information there, so you will be able to access and again use all the materials and learn and see how the different components were discussed and different strategies and activities that you can utilize in your settings. And we have, if you want to learn more about LinguaFolio, I think in the next slide we talk about Canvas, and we have a self-paced course on Canvas, so you can go and learn about LinguaFolio. If maybe you are new to LinguaFolio and you feel like, yeah, I explored the website and I see all the materials, but I'm hesitant about using them, I really don't know how to start, then we will recommend you to go to this Canvas, and you will access via NCED Cloud. Some teachers access, and they call it Power School, Nieces, Power Teacher. But when you access, you look for the blue icon that says Canvas, and that will give you, you go to Nieces, and then you can search for these. And if you have access, once you access the archives, you will click on these different images. We have one that is for K-12 educators. So you click and you see the directions. You can have all the steps, how to log in, how to access, how to enroll in the course, and then how to obtain your certificate of completion. But if you are a K-12 educator that wants to download it from our Canvas and put it on yours and maybe make some changes, tweak it a little bit for your PLCs or your groups in your school district, then you have those directions and you can download it as well. So please explore that. I see we still have some participants online. We really invite you to check that. It's self-paced. It takes it's approximately 10 hours to complete, but you can do it faster. And it's very simple. It will walk you through the different components, the different parts, and it will give you some samples on how to use it. Anything you want to add about this Canvas, Anne-Marie, before we finish?
No, nothing other than to tell you that, this is one of several Canvas courses that we've released that support language educators. And so this is another professional development resource for you that you can, as Sally said, enroll for with yourself. Go right into our Mises or home-based system and do that, or download a copy from Canvas Commons and use it locally. Several of you commented in the chat box that you are teaching others about learning about using LinguaFolio in the classroom, maybe new teachers you have, or maybe your particular PLC or department. So there's lots of resources here you can use as you go about that professional development.
Thank you. And we have our last slides about our cafe. We hope that you have enjoyed, and please tell us in the chat. We are going to release an evaluation to help us plan for next year, but you can access the cafe archives. We hosted 4 this year, and we were doing this on Tuesdays, 3:30 to 4:30. And we had different panelists invited, sharing all the information, their experience and their passion for language learners and using this tool. So we plan to have the same next year, maybe incorporate some tweaks based on your feedback. So please also check those archives. I know some of you have been with us the entire year, and we appreciate that. And we hope that you feel confident next year to be one of our panelists and share and see how you start integrating LinguaFolio into your instruction. And the next slide is our cafe. Today we had our last session, and thank you, Anne-Marie. And then we have our slide, our goodbye slide is Anne-Marie from World Languages and Satli, who's speaking from ESL Title III, our contact information. This is the NCDPI LinguaFolio team. And we're really happy to have you. I know we are 3 minutes later, but we're excited that you were able to join us today. If you have any questions, please add them in the chat. Any comments, closing remarks, other questions for our panelists, which we always appreciate that you take the time to join us and share. And thank you. I think we can have a few minutes for any more questions that you might have, and we can stop the recording.